the fact is, it's kind of building strength, building muscle is two sides, same coin. They're related, but they're not exactly the same thing. And I wanted to update you on the latest of how I'm seeing things, because it's starting to make a lot of sense to me. So when we're talking about using muscles, we're talking the brain is doing something here. There's a signal traveling through my body to this muscle here. Now, when we do that, the brain is literally telling what are called motor units to fire. A motor unit is a neuron with associated muscle fibers, and if the signal reaches that neuron, they all either relax or they contract. That's how muscle physiology works. When it comes to building strength and building muscle, both of them are that signal coming down to the neurons telling them to contract, but it's the sequence and what's going on with the contraction that's giving you the two different things. Imagine this is your muscle, and each one of these things represents a neuron with various fibers. Now, when we are lifting or moving our body and so forth, the amount of force we can put into an object or whatever at a given time depends on how many we're using at a single time. Now, when we use a muscle, we're not telling all of them to fire off or relax, because you right now, if your brain told every muscle fiber in a muscle to turn on, it'd rip it right off of your bone. Your muscles have the power to be insanely powerful. If you've ever had a cramp and you're like, oh, geez, the pain, that's something neurologically going on. Your brain is telling more to fire off than your muscles can handle. That's why it hurts so much. And so there's a safety mechanism. So when we contract a muscle, what's going on is we're not turning on some muscle fibers and they're staying on, and the other ones are not. They're kind of like Christmas tree lights. They're like on, off, on. They're doing this sort of thing. Okay, they're flashing on and off in sequence, and it happens so rapidly and smoothly that it seems like it's a constant contraction, but really it's a lot going on. If you have a lot going on, and you're kind of shaking, that's because you've got so many turning on and off at a certain time that it's not quite as smooth. So what we're dealing with is we're telling the muscles, I need a certain amount of force, and depending on that amount of force, we're asking it to use a certain number of fibers or motor units. So let's say we've got a fairly heavy weight, or just for the sake of simplicity, we're using 6. And then we lift it again, and we use another 6. And we lift it again, and we use another 6. Okay, because it requires 6. Now, if we lift a lighter weight, we're like, okay, all we need is like 3, and then 3, and 3. And as I said in a previous video, there's a lot of kind of folks saying that it doesn't really matter for muscle growth what you're doing. And here's kind of how I'm thinking about it. Muscle strength is about how much of your muscle you're using at a given time. Are you using more of these on a single rep or during a few seconds or whatever? Muscle growth is about how many of these you're using up. So muscle strength, how much you're using. Muscle growth, how much are you using up and causing to fatigue. So the idea is, if you are using a heavy load and you're using up all of it in 4 reps, or if you're using a lighter load and you're using a lot of your muscle in like 8 reps, theoretically, you're using up the same amount of muscle fibers, the same number of fibers. So from a growth standpoint, it doesn't really matter. The end result is the same. But from a strength perspective, you're training your mind to use more at a single time. This is why it is possible to get stronger, but not bigger. People who are new to any kind of exercise will experience this. I call it the honeymoon phase, because your brain is literally figuring out, what am I doing? How much muscle should I use at a given time? It's programming your nervous system to use more at a given time, and therefore you're going to get stronger. But technically, there's nothing physiological with the muscle that's different. It's all in the nervous system. Now, I'm not saying it's always one or the other thing. It's all going on at the same time. It's just which one has the emphasis to it. So there's a couple of neat observations we can use with this. Number one, what's the advantage of high load or a heavy resistance on the muscle? We're using our muscle fibers or units faster. Okay, so if we got like 6, 6, 6, 6. So for a building perspective, that may give us an advantage because if we're using it faster, we may use up more of it at a given time. When we're using a lighter load, we could just do a ton of reps and our minds are like, I'm tired. Maybe we're getting tired because of our breathing. A number of other things come into play. So we end up stopping even though we haven't used up quite as many of the muscle fibers and motor units. On the other side, using lighter weights, we could potentially use up more muscle fibers, okay? I remember the most muscle I ever built was when I used to do something called minute sets, where I was like, I'm not gonna count, I'm just gonna keep the tension on the muscle for a solid minute. And what ended up happening, what my theoretical mind was, if I lift a heavy weight, I'm getting to that fatigue point and I'm like, all right, I'm good. Oh, it's really hard, and I'm done. But I felt like I could push that fatigue barrier a lot further because I'd be like, oh, it's really burning. Oh, it hurts. I'm still going. I could keep going. And I'm still going, even though the fatigue level is extremely high. My mind is thinking, come on, we got to find more of these motor units to recruit. We got to find more muscle fibers. And as a result, the idea is I was using a hell of a lot more of these versus 5 reps. And I'm like, all right, I just can't do it. Because if you need like 1,000 motor units to lift a weight, but you only have 900 left over, you're stopping, but you still got a relatively fresh muscle. But if you're using a lighter weight that only requires 300 motor units, you could have 900 left over and you keep going and keep fatiguing. So this is probably why we're better off with kind of a middle grade, why you hear like this is for endurance, this is for muscle building or for strength building. Somewhere in the middle, we've got that muscle building happy range. But I think you could do it either way. The point is, again, it's what are you training after? Strength versus muscle. Now, of course, stronger you are, bigger, there is definitely correlation. But how we're thinking and perceiving things can have a very direct correlation to what we're emphasizing in our training. So that's my latest thoughts. Let me know yours down below. Till then, be fit, live free.